Hi, everybody. Welcome to Story Station. I'm so glad you joined us. I have one of my very favorite books to share with you today about one of my very favorite animals. So let's get our bodies ready. Can you get your eyes wide open so you can see all the beautiful illustrations? This is going to take place in the jungle. Get your ears ready, turn them up so you can hear all the wonderful things that this young woman does to save animals. And last but not least, get your fingers at your throat and open them up. Your voice box can be heard loud and clear about all the things I'm going to ask you. I can't wait to see your expressions on your face at this amazing story. Let's start now with our song about all the parts of the book. The title's on the front, the title's on the front. Hi-ho, Biblio, the title's on the front. The author writes the words, the author writes the words. Hi-ho, Biblio, the author writes the words. The illustrator draws, the illustrator draws. Hi-ho, Biblio, the illustrator draws. The spine binds the book, the spine binds the book. Hi-ho, Biblio, the spine binds the book. And now it's time to read, and now it's time to read. Hi-ho, Biblio, and now it's time to read. Can you put on your binoculars just like the lady has on the cover of the book? Can you tell what she's looking at? Holler it out. They have tails. You're right. Well, let's find out all about the chimpanzees because this story is called The Watcher, Jane Goodall's life with the chimps. And look at her looking through binoculars. Remember, binoculars let you look very, very far away. So the things far away look big and they're magnified so you can see them better. And The Watcher is written by Jeanette Winter. The Watcher, Jane Goodall's life with the chimps. That gives us a little clue, doesn't it? Her life. I think this story takes Jane from a very little girl to who she is now. And look at what she's holding. Can you yell out what that is? I think you're right. And we're so grateful to Schwartz Wade Books to give us permission to read this story today. Jane, Jane, where are you? Jane, can you hear me? Everyone had been searching for hours and hours looking for little Valerie Jane Goodall. Oh, can you see where she is? Then from the hen house, Jane came running to her mother shouting, I know how an egg comes out. At 5 years old, Jane was already a watcher. She used her eyes to watch and observe and discover. Jane watched all the animals in her world, big and small, earthworms, insects, birds, cats, dogs, and horses. And Jane quietly watched an English robin at her window for days and weeks. She saw him come closer and closer, then into her room to eat some crumbs off her bed. And when spring came, the robin even built a nest in Jane's bookcase. And if you look really close, this is where the robin is eating off her hand. And look even closer, right between the chimp's legs is a little nest that the robin built to lay her eggs. You can tell Jane is just about 5 or 6. She's been watching for a long time all the animals in her world. Perched high in her favorite beech tree, Jane read about Dr. Dolittle talking to animals and Tarzan living with the apes in Africa. She wanted to go to Africa too. And she wanted to talk to the animals. Do you think that would be fun? Which ones would you talk to? And she wanted to live with the apes. Ooh, would you want to do that? When Jane's school days were over, she worked and saved to buy a ticket to Kenya. She hid her earrings under the parlor rug for safekeeping. Oh, not her earrings. That's why it didn't make sense. She saved her earnings. Earnings is the money that she made from working at the restaurant. She hid it underneath a rug so no one would find it. Crossing the ocean, Jane stayed on deck and watched the waves. Even when the cold wind blew, she saw all the different blues and greens of the sea and the fish that glowed through the dark water. As Jane stepped onto dry land, she closed her eyes in joy. Jane looked for work with animals. So here she is on the ship. And here she is getting off the ship and standing on the dock. Do you see any animals there that she can work with? I don't see any. I wonder what she's going to do. What do you think you would do? Where would you look for work with animals? A famous scientist, Louis Leakey, was looking for someone to watch and study chimpanzees to help us understand the animals that are most like us. Would Jane be interested? What do you think? Yes, she was. Jane traveled to the place in Tanzania where the chimps lived. It was called Gombe. I wanted to learn things that no one else knew. Uncover secrets, she wrote. So she wrote about her adventures. Do you think she wrote in a journal? She set up camp far away from any human dwelling. Remember what a dwelling is? A dwelling is a place somebody would live, like a house or an apartment. Well, she set up camp outside in the Gombe forest, away from all humans. That first night, Jane lay awake listening to new sounds. The croak of a frog, the hum of crickets, the laugh of a hyena, the hoot of an owl, and looking up the stars, she knew she was home. Can you see all those creatures? There's the frog and the cricket. Way back there hidden is the hyena laughing, and there's the hoot owl hooting. And of course, the beautiful stars. Do you think she was afraid? Staying out there all by herself? I might be. At dawn, Jane walked into the forest. Up high, she found a peak to watch from. Every day, she climbed to the peak to look for chimps. But though she could hear their pant, hoot calls to one another, she didn't see them. Oh, look really, really carefully. On this mountain, I don't see them. On this mountain, I don't see them. On this mountain, ooh, are they hiding? Can you see them? Let's find out if she eventually finds them. Jane walked down into the forest, hoping a chimp would appear. Still, the cautious chimps stayed behind. Secretly, they watched Jane. And she kept thinking, when am I going to see a chimp? Do you remember what that is when they're kind of the same color as the branches? I think the chimps were trying to hide and camouflage so that she wouldn't see them. And then Jane fell ill with malaria, lying in her tent burning with fever. She almost lost hope. But when the fever left her body, she tried again to get close to the chimps. More weeks and months passed. That's a long time. A month is 30 days. Can you imagine staying in a tent more than 30 days and nights? Till one day, the chimps let Jane see them. She stayed in the background, never hid, acted uninterested, and quietly watched. Why do you think she stood so quiet? Why do you think she acted uninterested? Now Jane watched every day, all day, even huddled in the rain. She saw the chimps accept the rain, not look for shelter as we do, and she kept notes about it all. You have to be patient if you want to learn about animals, she wrote. Ooh, I bet that was hard to sit there patiently and not act interested. Maybe she was afraid to scare them. Maybe she was afraid, or maybe they would be afraid. Some nights, Jane even slept on the mountain peak. That's the very top of the mountain, to be near the tree where the chimps were sleeping. She woke at dawn and saw them slowly rise from their nests, sit for a spell, and then go off to find food. Jane named the chimps. To her, each one was different, just like us. A gray-bearded chimp was the first to approach Jane. She named him David Graybeard. And if you look closely, can you see the gray whiskers on his chin? David Graybeard he has taken bananas from my hand so gently. No snatching, she wrote. David Graybeard let Jane come close. She watched him shape a stick into a tool for digging termites. Before this, nobody knew that wild animals use tools. She watched David Graybeard eat meat. Before this, everybody thought chimps ate only plants. So he's sticking in that stick inside that anthill or termite hill and hoping the termites will go on the stick so he can eat them. And because David Graybeard trusted Jane, now the other chimps let Jane come close too. Chimps all around me, what a day! Chimps near, chimps far, old men, young men, ladies, children's, babies, teenagers, the lot, she wrote. Look at all of them. All different sizes. I wonder if some of them were a family. I see some holding babies, some siblings hanging from trees. Jane watched the chimps, and they were happy. She saw them hold hands and hug and kiss and laugh just like us. There's she writing in her journal. Jane watched the chimps when they were angry or scared, and their hair stood on end. She saw them swagger and throw tantrums and kept out of the way. And Jane watched the chimps at Kaigambi Waterfall, leaping and swinging in awe and wonder, and tumbling at the tumbling water. They look like they're having a lot of fun at the waterfall. At night, after supper of beans and tomatoes and onions, Jane listened to Mozart and Bach as she wrote up her notes from the day. Years of notes were piled high everywhere. Jane needed help, so assistants came to watch and write. Look at all those notes she wrote. And one day Jane sadly left Gombe. Wonder what she's gonna do. What would you do if you wrote all those notes about watching the chimps for so long? I wonder why she was gonna leave. All across Africa, forests were being cut down and the chimps were losing their homes. Poachers were shooting grown chimps and kidnapping their babies to sell to laboratories, to the circus, and as pets. Do you think the chimps would be happy living as pets, or in a circus, or in a cage? Jane's beloved chimpanzees were in danger of becoming extinct. They needed Jane to speak for them. Do you remember what extinct means? That means they would be gone forever. Jane hated to leave her friends, but she knew she must. She traveled to big cities and small towns the world over, month after month, year after year, asking for help to save the chimps and their forest. And then Jane returned to the forest of Gombe whenever she could. She climbed up to the peak, calling, "Hello," to the streams and hills and trees. David Graybeard at her side. He remembered her. Jane watched and listened again to the pant-hoot calls of her friends. And when she went back to civilization to speak out for the chimps, Jane carried her the peace of the forest. The forest in Gombe, where she talked to the animals like Dr. Dolittle, and walked unafraid like Tarzan, and watched and wrote, and opened a window for us to the world of the chimpanzees. And do you know that Jane still talks about them today? I hope you enjoyed our story called The Watcher by Jeanette Winter. It's a wonderful, wonderful story about someone very brave that opened our eyes to the lives of chimpanzees. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time on Story Station. Bye-bye.